Okay, my musical journey began in church, and I recall we were in the Borsalith area of the city of Birmingham, and we were worshipping at a school hall called Tyndall Street School Hall, and I would have been about 5 or 6. We had musicians in the church, but I recall we had a kind of mini concert at the time. And my best friend at the time, looking back now, he was definitely a child prodigy. And his name was Wayne Williams. He still is alive now. And he was playing a 6-string guitar that was taller than him. And we were at the concert, and his sister was called on to sing, and there was just uproar. And I couldn't see what was going on. But by the time she had finished singing and they called her back on, I realized that the people that were there, they stood up watching him because they couldn't believe how a 7-year-old young boy could hold these notes and play the song inch perfect while his sister sung. And that resonated in me, and I thought, that's very, very interesting. You fast forward, so we're still in church. Fast forward, I was about the age of 12, and we had a drummer in the church, but he would play like marching kind of drumming thing, and be old man. And I think he was a bus driver at the time, so he went to work. And Wayne said to me, just play. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, so he showed me a little beat. And he said, do you think you could do that? I said, I don't know. This was just before church. So he showed me, and I did it. And it felt right. There was something about it. And he was saying, do it again. And I did it again. I thought it was fluke, and I did it again. Then he showed me something else, and I did it again. Then church started. So I just sat in church, and he said, no, you got to come. So I had to go up and play in church right there, right then. And the rest is history.
Well, musically, I think for most Caribbean parents, their children having the ability to either play an instrument or at least be musical was kind of key, because when they started their Sunday schools, they only had their children to rely on. So my father could play guitar. He taught my brother to play guitar. And then he'd stand us in front of him and teach us songs. So one of the first songs I remember him teaching us was Were You There When They Crucified My Lord? So all three of us had to sing it, and we had to sing it in harmony. So again, these things you learnt instinctively rather than reading music.
Definitely.
And it wasn't until I was about 8, my mother sent myself and, well, just me, I think, to piano lessons. So between the age of 8 and 12, I learnt to play the piano. That's where I learnt to read music. But she started a Sunday school in the area we'd moved into. And, all these little Sunday school children, we didn't have any members. So I, at the time, was going to one church for Sunday school, and then would come back and then have Sunday school at my mum's church, her little Sunday school at the YMCA at 4th Avenue, Wolverhampton. And we'd lead the songs. So we were song leaders. So if you imagine, I would be about maybe 9, and I was song leading. So I'd sing the choruses, they'd teach us the choruses, and then you'd stand up and sing the choruses as well. So in terms of us singing, it was almost organic. So it was more the need to, rather than you had a talent and a gift being promoted. It was, we need someone to sing. Okay, Monica, you come up. And that's how I started.
For me, again, back in that small church in Tyndall Street at the time, later on became George Street, was a family, the pastor's family called the Williams family. And as mentioned before, Wayne Williams, absolutely amazing bass player and gifted musician. He could play the drums, he could play the guitar, he could play the bass guitar. He had an older brother called R.C. Williams. He was the maestro. And this is the guy that could read. And I remember one day seeing him. He was the choir master, and he was also the music director, and he was teaching the choir a song. So I never heard the song before, and he was looking at his this book, and he was picking away, and I thought, what on earth is he doing? So I went up, a bit challenged as I were at the time, and I said, "Good evening, Brother Oz. What are you doing?" Because I looked down in the book, and all I could see was Chinese writing. So I thought, maybe he's learning Mandarin or something like that. I said, "What are you doing, Brother Oz?" He says, "I'm learning the song." But I said, I don't see anything here. He said, "Oh." So I said, "What are those?" He said, "These are the musical notes." Poor colored fool me. So he was the first person that could read music. This was talking about 68, 69, something like that, 67. Yeah. He could read the music. So he'd pick it out, get the tune, the melody, then he'd get the choir together, and they'd teach the harmonies, the 3-4 part harmonies. And we were one of the first churches to have a proper choir as well, yes. And we were, from my history certainly well, the church in what then became George Street, we were the first church ever to have a concert anywhere in the Church of God of Prophecy.
Well, I can go back to, as Les was saying, maybe the mid-60s. And the place we lived, because, my father came here in 1952 to the UK, and I think just before the Windrush ship. He didn't come on the ship. He came on a ship, but I don't think it was the Windrush. And my mother came in 1956. That's another story, I won't go into that. But so say mid-60s, we were living in somebody else's house. So, folks, it was difficult to buy your own property. And my dad didn't have any intention of staying in England. His plan was always to go back to Jamaica. So he wouldn't buy a house. So we were living on Waterloo Road, 121 Waterloo Road, and one of these 3-storey houses. We lived right up in the top in the attic. And there was a barber shop just at the end, and they'd always have music playing loudly. And the song or songers at the time was Millie, My Boy Lollipop, My Boy Lollipop. So that sort of beat. So we'd go in the alleyway and we'd dance to the music. And the other influence was the Beatles, because they were kind of popular. Because all we'd heard up until that point was Chuckwagon Gang.
Jim Reeves.
4-part harmony. Jim Reeves. So every Sunday morning on the Blue Spot Ground, we'd hear Jim Reeves singing.
That's right.
And it was very laid back country, very slow music, or Elvis Presley, but again, just his Christian stuff.
Yeah.
So when we heard kind of upbeat, it was kind of quite exciting, sort of very early on. And then that graduated into the 70s with Andre Crouch.
Definitely.
Coming on the scene, and that was kind of phenomenal for us. Because up until that point, if we had programs, we'd sing out of
the hymn books.
Hymns of Glorious Praise. Not Hymns of Glorious Praise, sorry. Banner Hymn.
Sacred Psalms and Solar.
The blue book. So we'd sing the songs our parents would sing. And to overlay that, we'd even dress like our parents. So we were like 10, 11 and wearing hairnet and hats.
All right.
Because, that's what the parents did. That's what we expected. And you couldn't go to church without a hat. And then, as we got to teenage years, the hat was getting a bit too much. So we'd crochet little tams and just perch them. You could barely see the tam in your afro. We'd perch them on the side of our hair. So our world was opened up when Andre Crouch, came on the scene.
Without doubt.
Particularly for the younger folks. So people like Andre Crouch and the spin-offs from him, Billy Thetford, Danny Bell Hall, all those kind of people. So that was the early stages. And then can I talk about my choir?
Yeah, I'm going to come to that
in a bit. Okay, I won't do that.
But definitely.
Definitely the secular music played a part in influencing my love for music, and it was the Beatles and Millie in the 60s. Then obviously Michael Jackson in the early 70s. Michael Jackson, the Osmonds. but but the Jackson 5 were definitely it for us. The early 70s.
Definitely. Yeah, Trevor and Glenn, I've known them all my life. Don't recall ever meeting them. As far as I was concerned, they were my brothers. I had a brother who was living in Jamaica at the time, and never met him till he came to England when he was about 14. I would have been about 9. So Trevor and Glenn Prince were my brothers. I remember being at school one day, just started Tyndall Street Junior School, and this little boy came up to me and he said, "You got brother?" I said, "No, I've got no brother." He started fighting me. And he stopped. So when I caught out what was going on, we start chasing him. I chase him. I want to give him what for, but I couldn't because he stood between his 2 brothers.
Yeah.
And when I look up, there was like 2 tree trunk. And so I was mad and I was crying. So I walked away and I saw Glenn. So Glenn came to me and said, "What you crying for? What you crying for?" I said, "I'm the way I did tell me about him and my brother and all these kind of things before. No, you start fighting." He said, "Stop it." He said, "If them ever ask," it was a trick at the time. That's what they used to do. If you had no family, they'd fight you.
Yeah.
So he said, "Tell
Was
him."
it a white boy or a black boy?
White boy.
Okay.
So he said, "Tell him, say, yeah, brother here, Trevor and Glenn." And from that. So my mom used to babysit them when they were young boys. So as far as I was concerned, Trevor and Glenn were my brothers. So I was fortunate to have 2 musical influences, one from the Williams family from my local church, and then Trevor and Glenn later on. So what was unique about our church, the church we were going to, we call it George Street now, it was Tyndall Street then. We were one of the first churches to have a full band. Because most churches, they only had like a guitarist, or they may have a piano player or something like that. But we had bass, drum, and rhythm guitar as far back as I could remember, definitely. So we were very blessed. So when people came and saw us, they said, "Is it like convention every night at your church?" Because they weren't used to that. And when you think about racism and the windwash thing, I kind of thank God for that as well, because it ties up, because our parents couldn't go. Some of them, they weren't all Pentecostal when they came to England. From back home, they were Methodists and all these things. And that, courtesy of the scriptures, you came to your home and your home received you not. So a lot of them couldn't worship in what they call the nominal churches at the time. So they had to find school halls. So obviously you couldn't have pianos in school halls because they didn't have them. So that gave rise to portable instruments. So if you look at all the black churches, that's where it really started out, because you plugged your guitar in your little amp and it went your way. Yeah. So that's where it really came from. So you didn't have the big organs like you did in the Methodist church. So they had to make do, and that's how it happened. You packed it down, you packed the chairs away, and you went home, and it was a school building. So that's one of the things I'm grateful for that, because it brought that sense of music as well, because not from the traditional church with organs. We had electrical instruments again. So if that's what you play, that's Curtis, what you said, that's what you listen to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So when I met your brothers, and I remember it was about late 70s, early 80s, probably, I think mid to late 70s. We lived a street apart. We lived on George Street. You guys lived on Homer Street. And I went to see Glenn. We used to see him every night. And he said, "I want you to listen to this." And he was playing this music. Never heard it before. I said, "Who's this woman singing?" It was Chaka Khan. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. And he said, "This is the sound I want to play." And a little bit later, we heard of a group called the Brothers Johnson, bass players. And again, Glenn introduced me to them. And I'm thinking to myself, there's something there. At that time, we were having conventions. And our convention season for our church started about January. It went through to April. And what used to happen, you had popular songs or popular choruses that were played in each district. So depending on when your district convention was, by the time these songs had got to your district convention, most people knew them and they were just ordinary. So by that time, I began to play away from my local church and in conventions. I think I was playing in national conventions when I was about 14 national
You'd
conventions.
have been 70.
Yeah,
70.
definitely about 14. And
At Wembley.
I remember having a discussion with, I think it was me, Trevor, and Glenn at the time, because our convention was a bit late that year, and they were saying, we've been hearing these choruses through the different conventions, so we need to try and do something different, because like most musicians, when you're bored of a song, you're bored of it, and you don't have no feeling to it. So I remember hearing some tunes, I can't remember what they were, and something said, take the riff from this and apply it to this chorus. And it just flipped it on the head. And then we started doing that. So when they came to convention, because the convention, again, people came to hear the word of God, but people who were interested in music, they came to see what we do.
Yes.
So big competition was between District 1, which was the London area, and District 4. So we'd hear what they're going to drop. So it depends on who came first. So I felt like we needed to come with something, because they know the chorus. So let's put a rhythm on it. Let's put a different riff to it. Let's put a different lick to it, and just flip it. And so they knew that this came from Elvis, and then now it was. And we crossed them. So we cross-pollinated the worldly beats with the songs, and it just rolled on from there. So it made it interesting, and it was very impacting, I think, especially for a lot of budding musicians, because they just didn't. I mean, we hear the things on the radio, but we just never think about bringing them into the church, because it was sacred music. But we brought it across, and it made it more interesting and certainly different. But the greatest days of my life was definitely playing with your brothers, Trevor and Glenn. We formed Shiloh Band, which was a very good band as well. My best church days was definitely with those two guys. And we were a trio, sorry. And I'm a fan of trios. You know, I love the Police, I love the Jam. Something about trios. And when you have that relationship, like I said, they were my brothers, so we had this bond anyway. And then when it merged into this musical bond, it was time. It was time. Great days.
You're the London thing.
Yeah.
How long that's been going on?
A long time.
A long time.
A long time.
Right. So it'd be nice to talk a little bit about your choir, mass choir.
Yes.
Nice to feature that.
So my
So is this prophecy?
Yes.
Okay.
The Birmingham Mass Choir.
So emphasise that it's prophecy in mass choir.
Church of God of
There's a lot
Prophecy.
of mass choirs around in Birmingham.
It's
so
true.
just emphasise that. Yeah.
Thomas mentioned that he's going to use some of this because he's doing a heritage project.
Okay.
So you can snippets.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for letting me know that and for the clarification. So Les and I are a similar age. So our journeys, his was down the road of playing music, and because we're first generation,
That's right.
black, the UK. So we did a lot of firsts. So as he talked about the music, for the younger generation, that was a first for them to play in conventions. So that's why they started playing so young, because of the opportunity was there. For myself, my mother having a local church, and one of the ways to raise funds was to have programs. So you'd invite other churches to come around, and my mother
There are
again
many concerts, aren't there?
well ahead of her time, but she'd have New Testament brethren come. Reefa Graham, Reefa Lita, Pastor Graham, her name was, and she, again, woman out of her time, really engaged with young people.
Loved young people.
Loved young people.
Yes, she did.
And for a small church, when she started with children, she'd literally walk around the area and ask children who were playing in the street, couldn't do that now, take me to your mum.
Yeah.
And that's what she'd do. Take me to, where's your mum? And she'd go and say to them, rather than be on the street, I'll have them for Sunday school. And that's how she started back in the late 60s, maybe 67, 68. And then the church in 1971 was organised with 8 members. She died in 1988, and there were nearly 100 members.
That's right.
And half of the church, 50% of the church, were young people.
Yeah.
So she attracted, and not all of them were from church families. So, usually it's like, you come to church with your parents and then you become part of the church. Well, my mum won young people. So we had, quite a wealth young people in our local church. So anyway, going back to the program. So with programs, you have a choir that would sing. So we had like the older people, and then because you had to be part of the choir, so we'd be singing with the choir,
Hymnals.
singing hymns or Negro spirituals.
Yes, as well.
So we'd be taught. Sister Burton was our kind of choir mistress, and I remember her. You had to stand with your hand on your hip, on your waistline, and point your finger when you were singing the Negro spirituals. Brilliant. But that, again, those are highlights. But there was a gap. There was the need or a space for there to be young people
To be connected.
singing. So we'd sing the older songs, and then obviously in tandem came the Andre Crouches, and we wanted to be able to sing those kind of songs, a bit more upbeat. So I recall going to, my mother sent me to the General Assembly of the Church of God of Prophecy in 1977.
America, wasn't it?
1977. My first year going to the General Assembly. And myself and Pat Womack, I remember it very distinctly, Pat Womack.
That was in America, wasn't it?
In America,
That's right.
sorry. Pat Womack, previously McCullough, so Bishop Theophilus McCullough, T.A. McCullough's daughter. So we were there that year. We were around maybe 16, 17 that year. And we heard this choir, Battle Creek Choir from Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, the choir director,
Unbelievable.
the chord arrangement, like the big sound of a choir, blew us away. So we thought, wouldn't it be great if all the choirs around our district, in District 4,
Birmingham,
came together to make one choir. And that's how the District 4 mass choir was birthed, really. It was very embryonic. So in 1977, we talked about it. We had to persuade Brother McCullough, Pastor McCullough, who was the district overseer, persuade him to let us, have this choir, because he said, well, we've got a choir already. It was like the older people, and we had to sing like, the hymns and things, which we loved. And don't get me wrong, we loved the hymns, but singing "Earthly fame may never be my lot to hold" was very different too. Genesis, 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 Genesis. So so we were given our little squeeze, but it didn't happen until the kind of early 80s, really, 84, 85, it didn't really happen until then. But my local church choir, so I'll talk a bit about mass choir in a little while, but my local church choir now, we moved from programmes to having concerts. My mother saw that we could raise even more funds if we charged people at the door. Because when you had programmes, you didn't charge people at the door. They'd come in and then they'd boost. So it would be like, 10 pence this person to sing, 5 pence that person don't sing, £1 don't say nothing, sit down, and the night would string out, and all of the items you couldn't get through because of this kind of bidding backward and forward. So we had a concert, and to obviously attract not just the church family, but people
Community.
Outside of church, so neighbours and things like that.
Came.
You needed to have a choir that sounded like something sensible. So in our local church, we didn't have any musicians. We had like my brother Lenny, who would play the guitar, but he wasn't kind of skilled. He played, but he wasn't skilled, and Jerry Cohen that would play the guitar as well. But so for a concert where you're inviting, quite a big crowd, we needed musicians. In comes Trevor. And who was head of the Shiloh band, and let us kind of beautifully described how they came about. And I became friends with Trevor when we used to go on the coach to Ministers' Convention. So anyway, he brought me a sausage roll, I think. I think it was a sausage roll at a service station.
And he was there.
And,
never looked back. You never looked back since. You never looked back since.
And there's a story behind that, I haven't got time to go into it now, but back then, if boys talked to girls, oh my gosh, it was a big deal. Anyway, someone went to tell my mum that some boy took me out to eat. It was Trevor buying me a sausage roll. Anyway, but anyway, that was beside the point. But so Trevor graciously said he'd come and play for my choir. So the young people at my church, we'd learn the songs, again, choir songs. So at the time, it would either have been Walter Hawkins, a choral arrangement by Walter Hawkins. It would have been something that Andre Crouch might have sung, one of his songs, or, you know, from that era. And so we'd learn the songs first. We'd get the pitch from the tape that we'd listen to. And then Trevor would learn the music, he and the Shiloh Band, Glenn, Trevor and Les. And then Beres came a bit later on down the line as percussionist. And then we'd come on a Sunday, maybe 6 weeks or so before the convention, before the concert, we'd come together, the music and the voices, and then work it out, because obviously the musicians would have played, you know, in a particular way. We would have sung it a particular way, and then we'd work it out. But in the end, there was a marriage, and it was awesome just having that live sound, the live band. And then when we went, we started off obviously having the concerts in the church hall, because we were at Old Fallings Lane, United Reformed Church in Wolverhampton. And because as a choir we were getting more proficient, because the music was complementing what we were doing, then my mother, again, who was out of her time, pushed the boundaries. So a little church, backwaters in Wolverhampton, we had a concert at the Wolfen Hall. Town Hall.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Trevor and the band came to play, and I recall Les couldn't play for one of the concerts that we did, and Ray had to be the drummer for us, but he had to come to practices anyway.
No choice.
The brothers had no choice but to take him, because Sister Prince, their mum, Frances Prince, wouldn't allow Trevor and Glenn to go without taking Ray with them. And we had awesome concerts, spirit-filled, the anointing was there, the people begged for more, and we'd always leave them wanting more. That was our trick. You always finish on a high note, knowing that people want to come back to hear you next year. And obviously in between, we'd sing at other people's concerts and so on. But annually, we'd have our own concerts. So we became proficient, and clearly, you can imagine this being replicated at each of the churches around
Dudley,
the region, Dudley,
True
Small
Vine,
Heath,
amazing,
and so forth. And then the choirs, and what was born out of the choirs was groups. And then we'd sing Clark Sisters songs or Barrett Sisters songs, so that as smaller chorales, we again began to develop our skills, and out of that came True Vine, as Les was saying, in Dudley, and so on. And then all of those choirs, when Pastor Matt gave us the green light, came together as a mass choir, the Birmingham Mass Choir, Church of God of Prophecy. And we had, at our peak...
5? At
our peak, we were maybe 420. At our peak, we had 420 members of the Mass Choir. And we sang at places like the Birmingham Town Hall. We sang on TV, we sang in America, we sang in the Bahamas, we were recorded, live in America when we sang there. So it built fantastic friendships, as you can well imagine, when we had rehearsals, and we were very disciplined in our rehearsal time. Trevor played for the Mass Choir at one point, he played with Josh and so forth, and Vindel for the Mass Choir. And we would stretch our capabilities, stretch our voices. We didn't stick to songs that were kind of out there. We'd look for people like the New Jersey Mass, Timothy Wright, Thomas Whitfield, the Tommies, James Thompson and the Community Choir. We'd sing all of their materials, and we wouldn't find the ones that were commonly known. So when we had our concerts in the Town Hall in Birmingham, we'd sing songs like TikTok. I mentioned Genesis. We'd do old favourites, or we'd get some hymns and rearrange them so that we'd put our own spin on material, or write our own stuff. Aberdeen Street Youth Choir used to do that, write their own material and so forth. So we had a phenomenal experience. We had lead singers. Some of the things that, I didn't consider myself a singer per se, but, I'd lead some of the songs or direct the mass choir along with Joy, the late Lorna Watson Simmons, affectionately known as Joy, and her sister Hazel, who would sing the lead in some of those songs. So all in all, and again, I want to make sure I capture this as well, we weren't insular. Although there were possibly issues, particularly, I don't know, denominational boundaries going up through maybe the 70s. In the 60s it wasn't like that, but towards the kind of 80s, there was this sort of, apostolic can't mix with prophecy and so forth. As a age, our young people, we challenge those boundaries. So if Highgate New Testament was having a concert, we'd go and sing for them, or we'd invite Highgate to come and sing, you know what I mean, with us. So we tried to break down a lot of those divides and barriers and so forth, and had a platform. We used to call it the circuit. So we'd be singing on the circuit with Dave Copeland, back in the day, the Highgate Choir, New Testament Choir, and a lot of the mass choir singers now. A lot of them went on to do great things. BV, Sister Brown's daughters, Gloria Brown's daughters, and go and be backing vocalists for artists and so on. And our musicians again would go and do the same, or their children. So I remember Gareth Brown, him going to play drums for someone, and we fostered youth. So we'd have young people coming in and playing, or they joined the mass choir at 12, 13, and so forth. So again, it was an avenue for us to have fellowship and fun and so on, and be competitive. So the Birmingham Mass Choir would be competitive with the London Mass Choir, so that when we had our conventions, we'd be at the back and watch the London choir sing, and we go, we're coming on next, make sure, make sure. And Joy would have us drill. We'd drill with our vocal warm-ups and so on, and then we'd go and smash it. The Lord was in there as well somewhere, praise you, Jesus. But it was very much about demonstrating our talents and our ability with our singing. Yeah, so.
Got a lot there.
Did I go on too much?
No, because I mean, there's enough for me and there's enough for Roger.
The thing is, because I work with Karen Gibson.
Karen. And she was there with the London lot.
She's really PC in it. Yeah. So I explained to her that there's an issue with London. As far as I know. Yes.
She was too young. She was too young. They wouldn't have known then.
She was too young.
She was too young. She wouldn't have known.
She was too young. Oh God, they were. And our district, is it still recorded? You cut this bit out. But our district overseers hyped that up.
Oh, I do.
So you had TA saying we had the best. We were the best choir, the best musicians, the best offerings, the best this, that, the other. So after like London would sing, and then Pastor could get up and say, praise. He said, and now we're going to be hearing from the most fantastic, and he built us up. And then when we finished, his head was like this big. There was definitely
He could back it.
He could definitely back it, because we did have the Josh McCullers who played, the Vindels, the Lesburnes. We definitely had it. Yeah, definitely had it.
I've got two more questions. The first one is, what was the impact of the growing up?
Yes, definitely.
Last question. What do these songs, all the songs that I'm covering and stuff that you grew up with,
oh yes,
what do they mean to you?
Oh God, yes,
so
definitely.
Just those, is that
That's mostly
yes.
It's. I think for me, well, similar to yourselves, we were sheltered from a lot of the stuff that our parents really experienced. They didn't talk a lot about it, but I know you follow on to understand the racism that they suffered when they went into the workplace. We had a touch of it, definitely, because of where we lived sometimes. And I remember when we went to our secondary school, we all wanted to go to Queensbridge.
Mm.
That's where all the ragamuffins went. And my mum said, "Oh, I'm not going there." And she went and found a predominantly white school. When we got there, there's just a handful of black people, and the racism was starting, and we had to hold our ground. And I think for me, when I really got to understand it was when I became a missionary and they sent me to France in the early 80s. And I saw racism in its height out there in France. And I remember sitting on a bus one day and this woman was looking at me, "Je déteste." And I knew what she was thinking. And I just had a thought, this must have been what it was like when our parents came. Because they shielded us from a lot. My experience of racism when I was about, direct racism, I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I went to the neighbouring street to call my friend. I was knocking on my door. And obviously they weren't in, so I didn't know that. So I was knocking. And the neighbour, who was an English lady, heard me knocking. And she said, "Go back to where you come from, Blackie." So I was just in shock, and I'm walking down the street. I'm about 5 or 6 years old, and I'm trying to convince myself that she meant go back to your street where you come from, which was George Street, the next street down. And I'm thinking to myself, no, she didn't mean that. She didn't mean that. And I knew that was a racist onslaught. And as I said earlier on, you know, how we combated that is that we were a community by ourselves. The church was a community,
yes, definitely,
by ourselves. And we couldn't change society there and then, but we came amongst our own and we prayed and we sung the songs
of Zion.
because tomorrow was going to school and we're going to have it at school, or tomorrow named work and then we're going to have it at work. So we came and people wept. And they wept in the altars, and the songs, the old songs, the Negro spirituals, and the hymns. I must have the Saviour with me,
yes.
for I dare not walk alone.
Yes, and guide me, O thou great Jehovah.
And so you had to sing these songs. And sometimes when your parents would talk a little bit about it, they said how when the racist onslaught were coming on, they had to quote the songs to themselves, just like the slaves did. Back in the day of slavery, when they're picking the cotton, they sung the spirituals to get through that day. And I imagine many of our parents did that. And again, from a musical standpoint, as we said before, that's what gave rise to especially the electrical instrument, electronic instruments. They came because we couldn't go. They wouldn't allow us to worship. So we said, okay, since we can't worship, can we hire your back hall? Nope. And thank God for the schools and the caretakers. And I think every church that was worshiping in a school had the same caretaker, the one with the dog. And the pipe. And he'd flick the lights when it was time. That time the Holy Spirit was there, people were getting saved. Yeah. And he'd just come in with his dog and he starts. So
and that's what prompted the congregations to move out of school halls and buy their church buildings. Because they were being forced out at the
height of services.
In the height of services,
and it's because, again, from a very English perspective, you know, what they call a lengthy service or something like 45 minutes to an hour. And those days, we went to church twice. We went at 11, we came home at 2, and back in those days, we went in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for Sunday school. Yeah. And 4 till 6 was Sunday school. And then evening service was 6 p.m. till 10.
Yes. Yeah.
You get the thought?
That's right. Very much so. Very much so.
So it made us and it didn't kill us. And it's as modern as we get. When things get serious for us, we go back to our roots.
And remember.
And we sing the guide, you know. Yes. Our great Jehovah, lead me through this barren land.
Yes, definitely.
What's one of your favourite songs?
Hymns?
Yeah.
I like all of them. I think it's a very good one. I'll come back to you on that one because there's so many.
Yeah, I know my favourite.
I love most of them. I like all the hymnals.
So, impact of the Windrush.
What
do these songs mean to you?
We were, my first few years, I recall, as a child, a very small child, we were itinerant. I say itinerant because we were like, you know, like the children of Israel, we had no dwelling place. So we were in one room, we lived in one room in somebody else's house. And, you know, we'd move around again because my father had not planned to stay here, so I didn't want to buy a house. And my mother was insisting that, the children are growing up, we can't live like this, the 3 kids. So she got a council house, 50 Millington Road, was our first family home. And we were one of 2 black families on the street. My experience is slightly different. I know that racism clearly was an issue, but the neighbours that we had were very welcoming and treated us really, really well. So I can't say that I directly experienced, blatant racism. I think not until I went to secondary school, I would have thought. Secondary school, where I know I had to, when you're walking to school, you'd get jibes and things from the boys, because I went to an all-girls school. And the boys would, pick on you, but again, you had a sense of self, of being black in a predominantly white environment. You were aware of that, but I think because back then we met so frequently as a black community, because we had, as Les was saying, practically all day Sunday you were in church. Saturday you were either at a concert or a programme. In the week you're at prayer meetings. So you were always around, black people. So that sense of self and knowing who you were, I think apart from when I was very, very little, maybe about 6 or 7, I remember, I used to put a half slip over my head, and do this. I wanted long hair, and I'd do this. Probably that was the nearest I'd get to saying, the kind of white community was affecting me. But knowing who I was, I think, kind of centred me, and my friendship group. So I didn't need, some folks, they go to school, or as I got older and went to work, and work becomes your community. So they go out after work and so on. I didn't need that. So
church was everything.
What church was?
It was your life. It was your life 24/7.
And then when they got to the camping
everything.
ministry, where you met your friends in the summer. Oh my gosh! So there were timelines in the calendar that kind of you had to look forward to. The conventions in the spring, then the
youth conventions,
then the youth conventions, then the main convention in July, and then all the camps throughout the summer, and then winter retreat, and then the national secretaries rallies in the autumn. So throughout the whole year,
something going.
There was some stuff going on, which was fantastic. My daughter always says, "Mom, I wish we had
all those,
what you had." Although on the one hand, you could say it was a challenging time with poverty and for some, and the kind of out and out racism, but there was a lot of unity and togetherness.
We did come together.
So we, like I say, the impact, certainly for my father, he was always wanting to go back to Jamaica, didn't want to stay in England, I think because of racism. I reckon. He didn't actually say it, but I reckon that was the reason why.
They handled themselves well.
Yeah,
they really did.
They did. They were very, very,
they
very
protected
dignified.
us. They protected
very dignified.
us. They really
and
protected
like when you have somebody that was skilled, coming from a skilled work background, coming to this country and being told you can't have that skilled job, you've got to go and work in a factory. You know what I mean? It kind of, the two rubbed. But I had very progressive parents. I remember at school when I was taking my exams, I was very bright academically. And I wanted to go on to college and so forth. And I remember the teacher saying to me, the commerce teacher saying to me, oh, you can leave school with the qualifications that you've got and get a job anywhere. I said, but I don't want to do that. I want to go to college. You don't have to go to college. I went and told my mother this. Well, anyway, my mother went straight up to the school and she didn't talk to the teacher. She asked for the head of year, Mr. Good, his name was. And she said, how dare you? How dare you tell my daughter what she can and cannot do? If she wants to go and become the Prime Minister of this country, she could do that because, so you had instilled in you, and my mother used to say, there's no such word as can't. Don't let anybody put a ceiling on you. Whatever your ability is, you can maximise. That's why I went on to, get my MBA as a distinction, because I always had in the back of my mind, my mother, and my dad as well to some degree, but pushing this whole thing about education. So and my profession, when I, sort of settled on a profession, was in social work. And it was always a challenge for me when you placed black children in white families. one of the things I used to say to the foster parent is that, you know, you need to be able to, what you can't do, what a black parent can do, which is teach their children how to survive in a white community. You know, you can love a child, but you have to teach them skills. Our parents taught us the skills to hold our head up high, be confident in our ability, in what we were able to do. That's why my brother at 17, when he got the electrician qualification, by the time he was in his early 20s, he had his own business. Because you were kind of pushed to not work for somebody else. You do you. So it did have impact early on, but I think it strengthened me and strengthened my resolve to be the best that I could, because you had to outdo, you know what I mean, your counterpart.
The church gave you value.
Yes.
Gave you purpose. It gave you identity.
Yes, that was very important.
And
not having identity would have been a struggle.
And giftings as well. And you think something simple like public speaking.
Yes.
It's natural to us in the church.
Natural to us. And I preach
people of other cultures are thinking, how do you talk like that and you got no script? Because we're used to it from children testifying at church. So the skills that we have learned in the church have just been amazing.
Amazing.
But I love the Gospels. I love the hymns. You know, whether it's Iridi Sankey, Stir Souling, the Banner Hymn, and then the Hymns of Glorious Praise. I love them all. Love them all.
I preached my first sermon when I was 12 years old. So again, you know, being in the pulpit. So when we had things like interviews, we sailed through interviews because you were able to confidently speak. If you had to do a presentation, they'd go, oh my God. And you said, I'd volunteer, so I'll do it. Because we were used to public speaking.
And also if you're from a small church, you had no choice.
Well, yes, because you had to preach, you had to teach. So the teaching skills you developed.
Everything.
You know, you did it all. Really.
God is good.
My favourite song, and the story with this one, my mother died in 1988. I was 29 years of age. She died the 1st of April. And she loved to sing. She was a singer. And she had lots of favourite songs. But the song that kept me sane when she passed unexpectedly was On Christ a Solid Rock. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. All of the ground is sinking sand. And so I sang that, not at her funeral, but a few weeks later I was asked to preach, and I sang that before I preached. And it has stuck with me always. That's my favourite song. Yeah,
it's just loving it, you know. And I think from a musician's perspective, for me, it was always about how can I cross-pollinate. So it's a hymn that we've been singing. How can we flip it and make it more popular and put a beat to it, a jazz beat or a funk beat, just to turn it around. Yeah, I think we were at, was it Digbert? No, somewhere, it was a balcony. I mean, we were on a balcony somewhere, if I remember rightly. And I saw you. And
Town Hall.
I can't remember, it was somewhere.
He was playing
It was somewhere, but I remember it was a kit, it was the stick bag and everything. Because I knew, it was that time when I felt the call to go on to mission, so I knew that I was in transition, and when I knew that something had happened,
pick up the Bible,
I had to move on and go on and become a missionary, which I was doing that for 12 and a half years in Europe and Africa, still work in France now. And I knew it was the end of an era. And the thing about time and seasons, recognize when your season's up.
And move on.
Recognize, like a man walking around here or a woman walking around here in a bikini in the winter, something wrong, you know. But it's fine if she was in Jamaica on the beach, we wouldn't be looking at her strange. And it's recognized, and I knew my seasons was up. And I remember sitting down thinking, it's time now. And you're the person that came to mind. So I remember packing up all my stuff. I remember my sister was saying, what are you doing? I said, I'm packing it all up. Well, what are you going to do with it? I said, I know what to do with it. And I don't even know if you were there. You were coming. I don't know if I had the communication with you that night.
You called me to your house.
Oh yes, that other one as well. Because there was one where I gave you some sticks somewhere.
Stick bag.
Yeah, I remember that definitely. Yeah.
He loved his drum kit so he used to take pictures with his drum kit.
Didn't ask you no question.
Yeah, he used to stack them from the bass drum, the bass drum, right there up to the, and take pictures next to his drum. Oh yeah.
Hey?
Have you got any of those pictures?
Yes.
I've got one.
I've got a picture.
You've got a picture of that one. Used to be on your wall.
Yeah.
I've got that one.
I've got one somewhere where I stack them all outside.
Outside the house on George Street.
Yeah. And I think the thing is about whatever you do, it's about mastering your instrument. You're a musician, you understand the same thing. And sometimes you're looking for a sound. You understand your instrument. You and the instrument are one. And then you're looking for a sound. I think we spoke about this before, about we were at practice one night and your brother Trevor was tuning his guitar and I bought a new kit and I was trying to get used to it, trying to understand the sounds, because when you're used to like a 3-piece and you go to something like an 8-10-piece kit, you've got to know the sounds and try to understand the sound. And Trevor was tuning his guitar and I thought, that sounds interesting. And I said, play that again, and he was doing it. And I started tuning my drums, each drum, to the sound of each string of the guitar. Don't know why. Some kind of madness took me that day. But
a lot of it was intuitive.
Yeah, and every time we moved somewhere,
we weren't taught these things.
you don't. It just seemed right to me, because as you know yourself as a musician, when you're getting somewhere, the first thing you do, you put your kit up or you put your guitars up and you start tuning guitar. And I started doing the same thing, looking for a sound, and you just stop. So it was there, but God rest his soul, Trevor was just truly amazing. So
Yes, he
three
really
great
was.
influences for me: Trevor Prince, definitely. Ozzy Williams, still in America now, and my childhood best friend Wayne Williams, who started me on this musical journey and love for music, and still now. And it's about understanding we were among great people.
Yes.
And it's only when they've gone we realise, or we step into the role of leadership, you look back and think, how on earth did they do? Your mom, Frances Prince, unbelievable woman. Unbelievable woman.
But they did.
And what she believed, she held her ground, she held her faith, and she went all the way. And we are indebted to them. And even when we bury them with tears in our eyes, we still owe them. And God bless them.
We will remember.
And we will never forget them. And thank you for your time.
My mother, as I mentioned her, Pastor Reefa Graham, understood the value of having good musicians, because we didn't have any in our local church. And so when Trevor and the Shiloh Band came to play for us, my mother insisted. When they came to rehearsals, she'd cook fried chicken, and she'd send food for them. So after the rehearsal, they'd lick their lips. They'd probably try and eat it before. Because Mummy said, make sure Trevor eat, eat. And she'd cook and make sure they eat. And then when obviously we started to have more coming in, because we had a larger arena, my mum would give a portion of the monies that was raised to the band. So I think she might have been one of the earlier people that
most definitely
paid musicians for their time and Trevor didn't ask for it.
No.
He didn't kind of, nowadays they'd give you we're not coming unless you can pay this. Yeah. And she called it a love offering, but she'd make sure she took a proportion of the offering. I think at one time it was like £100, something like that. But she'd put that in an envelope and give it to Trevor. But it started off with her cooking food, and then once we started to get more money coming in, she took a portion of the takings and gave it to the band.
The going rate at the time was a ginger beer
and a patty. And we went to London one time. We'd hired a van, hired speakers, everything, the lot. We went to London, did the concert, and when we came by, the lady gave us 2 patty and a ginger beer. And she said, you're lucky you get 2. Not realising you'd had to spend your money to get the equipment. You're lucky you get 2, mate. Okay? There you go. So my mum was a bit more advanced. It's just we understood, again, when you love something you don't charge. That's right. And we understood, and out of the passion. It's just to see, the churches, because again we were doing our bit to build the churches,
because people came to these concerts, and most of the concerts were named in aid of building funds.
They were building
So
funds
when I
to get
see a lot of the
buildings.
churches that I've been, we travelled around the country, and when I see a lot of these churches like Bristol, Tudor Road, Bristol, we went down there, did concerts down there. And I've done a lot of churches I go to, and I remember coming there, and it's either going there for like conventions or we're going down there to do a concert. And if you were a popular band,
You're always cool. Yeah.
they'd put you on. And the thing they used to do as well, they used to put your name down on the flyers before even asking us, because they knew that if we were going to be there, they're coming.
People.
And when they cut onto that, that was the one. That was the one. But again, we did it as unto the Lord. And
Yes,
God rest your brother's soul. May you rest in peace. He was just phenomenal. I miss him every day. And as I said before, it was the greatest era in my life, apart from going on mission. But in my formative years in church, music was everything. It still is. Still is.
And that, and that was a way of raising money for the buildings, concerts.
We did it.
Concerts. So when we got to places like Town Hall and had mass choir concert, and we would fill Birmingham Town Hall, fill it completely.
No problem.
And so the mantra for us was excellence. So what we did, the practice was excellence. The musicians had to be, had to do what they were doing with excellence.
No, we had
We'd train our voices. Don't forget now, we weren't classically trained or anything. When we were learning songs, we'd listen to a tape or a record, and we'd pick out the parts, and then we'd have section leaders. Someone would teach the alto section, someone would teach the soprano, would teach the bass and the tenor section, and that's how we'd do it all by our ear. And obviously later on, but I think all throughout the whole of the choir, my time with the Birmingham Mass Choir, Church of God Prophecy Birmingham Mass Choir, we learnt the songs by ear. We learnt the songs by ear, and if you hear, it's a shame we haven't got any. But if you hear the original version and our version, I mean, we tweak it. Maybe you'd probably want to buy our version because we blow it out the water all the time.
I think the thing is ultimately the great joy about playing in church, live music.
Live music.
And you're a musician yourself. There's nothing better than live music. Think of the conventions where you're playing one song for 20 minutes straight. You imagine playing a song and a chorus for 20 minutes straight, and you got to hold down that beat for 20 minutes. And the power of the Holy Spirit goes down, and they're just singing on. The people are dancing in the aisles and marching around the building, and you got to lock it down all when you're tired. And there's a lady named Sister Flary, and she felt it one, and she'd going like this, saying, "Keep it going." I'm tired, tired. And she used to keep us going. And people gave their hearts to the Lord. People were filled with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit came down and touched lives. People received a calling into ministry. Churches were birthed, and people got excited about getting on and doing the work. And I think a lot of musicians are the unsung heroes in churches. And I think especially the 80s era, when our generation were of an age where we didn't have to go to church because we were like 18, 19, we could do what we want. And it came at the right time to keep the people together, keep the young people together, because they were interested. And I remember a few people we were talking to, and they said, "I'm clubbing it, man." And one guy said, "I heard that beat in a club last night." And he couldn't get his head on because he said, "I heard that. Were you playing something?" No. I said, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about." But he said, "Yeah, I know." And they couldn't understand it. They thought the twain didn't meet. And it was there, it made it interesting. People started coming. We had a thing called Ministers Retreat, or Ministers Convention. I'll close out with this. And it was predominantly for ministers, right? And prior to that, we had the camping ministry, and everybody met each other at camp. And then following that would be the Ministers Convention, which was only for ministers.
Ministers couldn't get in.
The ministers couldn't get in.
It's the young people. Filled the place up. Because it was somewhere to go and meet your friends.
Meet your friends, and it's just everything. But it's the Word of God, obviously, the hymnals, and we celebrate them. And it's everything. You take what you have from your tradition and you make it modern. You make it relevant to today. It's a bit like one generation is singing, the other generation is rapping. Same message, just a different style. And we just got to keep it and treasure it. And God bless you for what you're doing, what
Yes.
you're recording.
Applaud you for
And
that.
I pray that it'll be in the archives. Our biggest challenge for me, I think now, is we must be mindful to document these things. Because I think the worst thing could happen is for you to have your grandchild say to you, tell me about grandma. And you say, I don't know.
Can't remember.
I don't know. We've been robbed of our history through slavery. And we have to embrace and preserve that which is tangible. It's a bit like we know we can strongly go back to the Caribbean, but from the Caribbean to Africa, only one or two can do that. So that which we know about, which is the Caribbean and British life, we have to lock it down. And I applaud you guys for documenting it because it's necessary in this time.
It's kind of, it's